I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today because I'm here with Tim Stanfield from ReadyMadeRC. And Tim and I are going to talk about, I made a video a little while back about how low band or L band is illegal. And that's something that I'm passionate about as an RF professional. And apparently that's something that Tim's also passionate about. I know a lot of you guys out there do care about compliance and maybe are curious. Maybe you just don't even know about these rules. You're new to FPV. Well, hopefully we will educate you and have a good time along the way. So Tim, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
No, I'm glad you could have me on. I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk about this and to talk to you.
I think a good place to start is why is regulation so important? I know a lot of people are cringing to hear me say that because regulation, there's a very strong, a lot of people have an anti-government sense now. And so when they hear about government regulation, they're like, screw the government. But everybody I know who is a ham operator, who is we feel very passionately that regulation is important in this case. Why is that so important?
Well, there's a lot of aspects of that, but, I'm right with you. We feel overregulated and over-controlled in many cases, but there's a reason that some of this is here. Frequency control and dealing with what's being broadcast on all the various bands is, the FCC is tasked with that. And, bureaucratic or not, they do have a plan. And, we are able to share some of these frequencies that are often, surrounded, other nearby frequencies are surrounded by, critical applications, things that, aircraft navigation, medical equipment, communication, industrial equipment, and our own home equipment as well that we've become, so reliant on for Wi-Fi and, internet and every other piece of data that's going through the air. This is important that we not cause problems with that, and not only for the sake of not causing harm, but also for the sake of giving us a bad name, because public perception is important as we try to grow this hobby, the FPV hobby, and make it bigger. If we're taking or damaging other people's communications, or worst case, cause some major issue medically or aircraft, whatever, that's bad press for us, and it's going to get us banned. It's flat out going to, it gives the politicians ammunition to just say, you guys are out of here. No, enough of that.
Yeah, and I think, I know a lot of people right now are tuning out because they don't like that message. There's also a practical side as well for the people who aren't into that message. The practical side is that RF doesn't work if RF is inherently a shared resource, and if someone is making noise or blasting on the resource, no one can use it. The analogy, I think, and I got this from the comments of my video, so I didn't even make this up. They said, how would you feel if you were flying and someone was transmitting and was causing you to have fail safes, right? And causing your copter to crash. And when you said, hey, buddy, I'm flying here, they said, hey, screw you. I can do what I want. Screw regulation. That's exactly how the weather radar operator, the telemetry, whoever it is that you're stomping on, that's exactly how they feel.
Right. And even flying amongst each other, again, people are just ignoring the rules set up. If you go to a fly-in or some event and someone ignores the rules, it makes it miserable for everybody. And we can have a lot of fun given within the constraints that are there, and have plenty of resources available bandwidth-wise to really have a lot of fun and use it and still stay within the rules. So, yeah, I would agree.
So let's talk about some of those rules. This is a great segue. What are the rules under which we operate? And I actually got this wrong. I thought that we were ISM operators, but I think that we're not operating under ISM, are we?
So I have to throw in the caveat of I'm not an attorney. None of this is legal advice. This is all information that's been learned based on things that we've read, the FCC rulings on certain FPV vendors in the past, some of the language they've used, trying to understand the incredibly complex FCC rules. So, I can't, don't take this as legal advice, but this is our opinion based on what we've read and figured out. But yeah, you mentioned ISM, which is part 18, I believe, and there's also consumer devices, part 15, which is just classifications the FCC uses. Basically, to be able to operate license-free in the U.S., you need to be using some radio frequency band and equipment that has been authorized by the FCC to operate. Part 15 and Part 18 ISM, generally, they're going to be very low requirements, and the requirements vary based on frequency. But if the equipment you're using isn't certified or hasn't been tested and proven to pass the requirements for either of those bands and different power levels at those bands, the equipment can't be operated by a general consumer. You have to be able to operate given some set of rules.
So let's back up for a second. We start from the premise that if everybody just transmitted on whatever frequencies at whatever power levels they wanted, the analogy I've heard is called the tragedy of the commons, where when everybody just sort of does whatever they want, this great shared resource is ruined. People can Google the tragedy of the commons if they want to. It's a philosophical thing. But so we start from the premise that we need some kind of rules, and then the FCC makes these rules, and the anti-government folks can debate the authority of the FCC, but that's not what we're here to do.
It's there, right?
And one way to do it is to get a licensed frequency. So, for example, the FM radio stations, the television stations in your town, they have a license from the FCC to use that frequency. They're the only ones who are allowed to use that frequency. They can blast massive amounts of power because they have the exclusive use of that frequency. But those licensors are expensive, right? They're hard to get because that is a very, very valuable and rare resource. And the FCC has then said, well, we're going to make these other bands, the ISM band, the ham band, and so forth, available for amateurs to play with. But you still got to follow some rules. It can't be just a crazy Wild West. And that's what the Part 15 and Part 18 that we're talking about. What you're saying is that the operator needs to be licensed. You need to have a ham license, and then you can use this equipment because you have been licensed to know what you're doing and to not violate the rules. But if the operator isn't licensed, then the equipment itself needs to be certified. Is that right?
Right. From our understanding of the rules as written, that it's, these Part 15 devices have been certified, so anyone can use it. You can go to the local store and buy a device on a shelf and be off and running and not worry about any licensing requirements. But anything that hasn't been proven to meet those rules, you need to, again, the point of the amateur radio really is to understand the basic rules and technology. You need to have that backing. It's really there to make sure you have that understanding of what you're doing and what effect you can have on other things around you.
The equipment we're using, your TBS Unify, your Immersion RC Tramp, all those video transmitters that we're using, those are not Part 15 certified. And in order to use them legally, the operator needs to have a ham license, right?
Correct. And from an importer standpoint, obviously running ReadyMadeRC, but anyone importing in themselves as well, there's some additional liability and requirements for when you're bringing devices in. I can import devices that can operate on other frequencies, but I can't redistribute them to U.S. customers based on the current rules coming from the FCC. And unfortunately, we know that, and I think part of it's, I'm a ham, and also have been doing this FPV stuff for a long time, kind of the FPV, group of FPV hipsters that were doing it before it was popular, right? But, there's a group of us that have kind of known that the FCC has kind of taken that stand of going after some of the vendors in the past. Could technically go after the users as well. But the biggest thing we don't want, earlier that, they've carved out these amateur frequencies for us to use. What we don't want is for them to say, you know what, we don't like what these guys that are just ignoring most of the rules are doing. We're going to lock it down, and they could come out with specific rulings against the use for drones, or there's
countries where things like that have happened. I can't name them off the top of my head, but I hear from people in my comments on my YouTube videos. There's countries where FPV simply isn't legal, where it's not legal. For example, I think in Germany, for example, you can't have an airborne transmitter more than 25 milliwatts. They simply can't do that.
Right. They could very easily clamp down more tightly or ban it completely. And, we are, and as much, whether we agree with their ability or their, that they should be able to do that, it's the way it is. And unfortunately, they have the power of fines and other things that can really people in the industry and the users as well. You don't want to be on their bad side.
And I I think you got a good point there, and this is a perspective that you bring to the table uniquely, which is some people say, well, you know, I'm not, and I agree. Individual user is really unlikely to get caught by the FCC because you're mobile, because you're somewhere for an hour, 2 hours, you fly, you leave. It's not like you've got a non-compliant transmission and it's in your building and it's just sitting there 24/7 for them to track down, which is still unlikely, but it does happen. But I think who's really going to take the hit is the importers and the manufacturers, in as much as the FCC can crack down on them, guys like you.
Right. And unfortunately, you know, there's a lot of Chinese companies making equipment and marketing it to businesses, folks just starting up, some that have been around a while. And the businesses just don't know that maybe they're marketing equipment that they do know and are just ignoring. You know, again, the FCC, we've gone through this before. It's been a few years, but they sent letters and fined a few companies that were specific to FPV equipment. We base a lot of what we allow on the language that was in some of those letters, where they said that, you know, this equipment can't legally use the exemptions that are used for amateur radio equipment because they broadcast outside of the amateur bands and so forth. Therefore, the equipment is flat out non-compliant, and the fines for the importer can be on the order of I can't remember. I think it was $9,000 or $12,000 per unit. And you know, and obviously, if they knowingly are doing this, then they're likely to be in even more trouble than if, you know, they didn't. Granted, you know, not knowing the law is no excuse, but you know, I think the FCC has shown that they're willing to give them warnings to fix it in the past. But it's been a few years, and a lot of people, I'd say the majority of FPVers were not around when they went through that the first time around. And these companies, most of the companies that are selling equipment, have no idea. I really don't think they know. And there's some false information spread around too. You know, one of the things I noted is I keep seeing thrown out, oh, if it's under 25 milliwatt, it doesn't need.
Right.
And that's the power. Well, first, that under much the band, that's too powerful to be certified anyway. But that's not relevant to the being in. It's not Part 15 or Part 18. You need to be operating it under some other set of rules. In this case, it's amateur radio rules.
Yeah, the takeaway of that, and that's the thing I've made a video about, FCC certified transmitters. By the way, I think there's really only one FCC certified transmitter. That's that Fat Shark one.
Right, I totally forgot about it. Yeah, the Fat Shark, TBS has one that says it's FCC certified, although they were supplying it with a different antenna than it was tested with.
Yeah, and so the way this works is, for the viewers who may not know, the way this works is that if you want an FCC certified transmitter, which means that anyone may use it with no licensing whatsoever. The idea is that either the operator needs to be licensed or the device needs to be licensed. One of them needs to be licensed. So if you have a licensed operator, in other words, a ham license, then you can use any device you want and you're in charge of being compliant. If you're some Yahoo who hasn't been certified, we assume you don't know what you're doing and the device is licensed. But here's the kicker. The device cannot change. So it's submitted to the FCC. The FCC certifies the device and nothing about the device can change. So you can't put a different antenna on it at all. And what you're saying is that if there's a device out there, this TBS device you're talking about, you're saying it was being distributed with a different antenna. So technically it's not compliant.
Yeah, when I looked up their FCC submission, yeah, it had a totally different antenna than what they were including. You know, and again, is the FCC going to go after people for changing an antenna on a router or something? Probably not, unless you're interfering with someone. You know, but you know, people do it all the time. The reason RPSMA connectors existed in the first place, it was supposed to be make it difficult to change your antennas, and now you just need an adapter, right? So, but yeah, that's generally the way to look at it. You know, and again, I'm going to come back is, you know, we want to support and build the hobby. So, you know, it's not just about, oh, I'm going to follow the rules because I'm going to get fined, but you know, we want to follow these rules because we don't want them pulling a rug out from under all of us.
I would go even further than that, and to try to not just chastise people for breaking the rules, and that's not what I feel like you're doing, but to try and make an even more fundamental case that the reason we want to obey these rules is because it's good for us and it's good for our neighbors. In other words, other people who are using this resource. You know, it's just considerate to not Call me crazy. If I live in an apartment, I don't want to play loud rock music at 2 in the morning while my neighbors are trying to sleep. It just seems like a nice thing to do. Likewise, we don't want people blasting their stuff on our frequencies when we're trying to use it, and they want the same thing from us. Even I guess even if there weren't an FCC to try to fine us and all, this would still be a good idea to do these things.
Right. Agree. Yeah. We're all good neighbors. We all want to play together, work together, live together, and have a good time, and be able to. Everyone, you talk about freedom. You can take away other people's freedoms in a lot of ways if you're doing things that prevent them from using the equipment or what they have as well. So it's important. I've seen, we've moved away from 2.4 gigahertz video for a lot of reasons, but I've seen when people were using 2.4 video, they were taking out Wi-Fi and other things in their general vicinity. I haven't heard of that happening or seen it happen directly with 5.8, but it easily could. We're shared band, although the consumer 5.8 band is a lot wider and probably can work around us a little bit. But that doesn't matter. It's the rules are there for a reason. And I think one of the things that some of the manufacturers realize this and have made sure that they're compliant. And I think it's important to support those people and push the vendors and other people that are maybe not selling compliant systems to be compliant, because we all in reality know that a lot of non-amateurs are going to pick up this equipment anyway. That I'd be willing to bet the majority of people don't have an amateur radio license, even though it's easy to get if you take the time to do it. But if you support the people that are doing it right, the ones that aren't doing it right have more incentive to fix it. And then we're all we're less likely to cause issues with these other folks outside of our bands. Everything we sell and ship to the U.S., including made by other manufacturers, is compliant. Immersion RCs has done well of making U.S. versions of all their stuff. Horizon Hobby and all their various brands. TBS, those guys have really. Trappy has put out a lot of discussion about wanting to make sure our hobby is strong recently, and maybe supporting valid vendors. Their equipment about it, and they are they're working on maybe some modifications, but I think it's right now most of their stuff isn't. They have some language that's kind of confusing in their manual that almost implies you don't need an amateur license to use them out of the box, and that's not true. And when you do unlock them, they are not legal for amateurs because it opens up some of those other frequencies. And low band, which you briefly mentioned, is kind of the, I think a lot of people are like, hey, great, new band, we can add all these people. Honestly, just because it's called it's a 5 gigahertz band, some of it overlaps aircraft navigation and satellite communication and so forth. It's a bad one. It's probably just as bad as some of the frequencies near 1.3 gigahertz that are also in aircraft navigation and other uses as well.
And one of the arguments I hear people make, and there's some truth to this, but the argument they make is, look, if I'm transmitting at 25 milliwatts or 200 milliwatts and I'm below the tree line, what are the chances that I'm interfering? And you're right, probably the chances are pretty minimal. But the problem is that you can't know. You can't know that you're not interfering. And you're just basically saying, I don't care. I hope I'm not interfering, but I don't care and I don't know, and I'm just going to go fly is the gist of it.
I don't think you're ever going to actually have an indication that you're interfering with someone. You could be out there flying and thinking, I'm fine, I'm doing my own thing. Meanwhile, someone somewhere else, a technician entering some signal or, some erratic data or something that, and it may never even come to public knowledge that there's interference going on. But again, if the FCC figures out that it is happening, and it happens to be with these crazy drone flyers and their dangerous toys, they're gonna, how the public looks at us. We want a positive public perception. We want people to know the good, how much learning can happen for the younger folks, and technology, interest in technology and everything else. We don't want any negative publicity. We've had enough of that in the past. We don't want any more. Let's show we can be good, citizens, if you want to call it that, and just make sure that we're, being part of the community. And the funny thing is, and I just hit one of my notes that we have here is, the FCC actually has given exemptions at a couple events specifically to allow some of the, and it's not low band, but some of the nearby frequencies just above and below the amateur band and the 5.8 frequency band, which was really cool. But what perplexes me a bit, and still I wonder, it's not legal for any business to import or distribute devices that can run on those frequencies. So how, even though they've allowed that exemption, if I were to import it and sell it to someone, they could find me. I think these races, if they get that permission, should be giving out the equipment temporarily to people, or maybe unlocking in the case of the tramps or some of the others, that maybe they can use the race director wand temporarily, and then be back to legal. Just again, for the sake of all of us. I hate to sound like I'm being the you got to obey the rules, because I'm, we want to fly and have fun too, and we know how they want to clamp down, but let's keep us all flying. I don't want to have us all saying, yeah, remember back a few years ago when we used to be able to fly FPV, but sucks we can't do that anymore.
Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned there is about how Immersion RC handles the tramp. And I am really impressed with what they've done there, because it's not like we have to either be clamped down and just not have any fun, or be completely wild. What they do with the tramp is, if you have the race director wand, the race director can choose to reassign the frequencies that the transmitter will use. So if the race has gotten an exemption from the FCC and they're allowed to use certain frequencies, then the race director can enable that on your tramp, assuming you have a tramp, of course. You show up, you don't have to swap out your video transmitter. The same thing could happen if you fly to Europe or China or anywhere in the world for a race. The race director can assign you to the local frequency set. You can be compliant, you can race, then they can set you back to your home frequency set and you can go home. And that's a really cool thing that they've done. And it's a nice feature that I don't think anybody else has, as far as I know.
No, TBS has some controls in their system. I know you can set a lot of things through the radio itself, which is great. I think it's a great advancements for us. And these are the types of things that could be useful outside of FPV in the future, or outside of the hobby. But unfortunately, theirs unlock a little too easily right now. So for those who care about it, please be vocal to the manufacturers to let them know, look, you'll still buy their stuff if they get rid of these few illegal bans. So they need to know that, because I get pushback. We get people that, some are like, well, it doesn't matter, no one else cares about it. Well, they're going to care whenever the supply dries up, and the only place you can buy is direct from China, and you hope that it doesn't get snagged on when it gets imported. We don't want any of that. Everyone needs to care to keep this hobby going. I'm sorry, I keep saying it over and over again, but it really is important.
Yeah, there is an issue it's kind of a sticky issue, which is that you got let's just say foreign manufacturers. We don't want to pick on China too much, but you got foreign manufacturers selling on sites like Banggood and so forth, and anybody can just go buy one. And of course, it comes through customs, and customs doesn't know, because if customs sees a pallet of goods come in and it's marked RF video transmitter, then they can decide to let it in or not. But if it's just a package from with one transmitter from Banggood to you, they really just can't possibly keep those out. And those manufacturers, it doesn't seem to me like they really have any incentive to be compliant. The FCC's not going to fine them, are they, or are they?
Well, I know that they went after Hobby King for some RC transmitters, but it seems like those were only ones being shipped from their U.S. warehouse. I see they're still selling them, just not from the U.S. warehouse anymore. It's the orange equipment. It is difficult for them to go after those companies. They can try to block import. But, they know the tricks. They know the way around it. All those companies do. They're the only thing they can really do is go after the people importing, for the most part. And we've been flat out told by companies that they don't care. They could care less. As long as people are buying them, they're going to keep selling them. And like I said, we will only buy from companies that will allow us to lock them down for our own. But again, hundreds. It seems like around the corner there's a new company making something similar to what everyone else, probably a copy of what everyone else is making, and they just don't care. Someone will buy it. And like I said before, some of these guys that are trying to start up a little side business, I think it's a great thing. That's what this country's all about. That's how ReadyMade started. They don't know. They just don't know, for the most part, that this stuff's illegal. And we've been talking about this, since 2008, 2009, before that probably. Again, the FCC, it's been a while. They went after some people back then, but just get the knowledge out there. I'm glad that you brought it up in your other video. And I'm glad that you, as having an RF background and kind of new-ish to the hobby, you've been around a little while, but newer than some of the old school folks, are able to bring in that new perspective of kind of seeing this and learning this and being able to share it because you've got such a good following. And good job. I mean, you have the understanding and you're able to convey it to people in a way that they like, and that works out great. I'm really glad that you did that other video, gave us the opportunity to talk about this now.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. Anything else, anything we overlooked or anything else you want to hit before we sign off?
No. I just hope everyone gets to go out and have some fun, not worry about this technical stuff over the weekend, right? Enjoy your Easter weekend and, or whenever this is posted. Just have some fun and, support the companies that are keeping everyone alive.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Tim, for coming on. And as always, happy flying.